When the world started going sideways, nobody really noticed at first. Folks were too busy scrawling, posting, hustling through life, chasing paychecks and weekend vibes to see the cracks starting to show in what used to be called civilization. But by the time the first emergency broadcast hit the air, it was already too late. The streets of Denver, once buzzing with traffic and laughter, were now filled with sirens, smoke, and a sound no one ever wanted to hear, the gut-chilling growl of the dead. Jake Hollister had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a regular dude, 32, mechanic by trade, ex-high school quarterback, the kind of guy who lived paycheck to paycheck and tried to stay out of trouble. But that night, when the first wave hit, when the city went dark and the screams echoed through the canyons of skyscrapers, Jake became something he never thought he'd have to be, a survivor. He had been at his shop, working late, radio humming low, when a weird static interrupted his favorite classic rock station. Then came the voice, shaky, desperate, saying people were biting each other, saying hospitals were overflowing, saying the National Guard couldn't hold the line. At first, he'd laughed, thinking it was some kind of prank or wild broadcast stunt. But then the power flickered, the smell of smoke drifted in, and he heard glass shatter outside. That's when Jake grabbed his wrench like it was a sword and locked the door. He peeked through the window and saw chaos painting the night. Cars crashed into streetlights, people running, shadows moving in ways that didn't make sense. He saw a woman trip, a man run to help, and then the woman lunged, not like a person, but like an animal starving 4 years. Jake didn't stick around to see the rest. He grabbed his backpack, a few bottles of water, a flashlight, and the old hunting knife his dad had given him before he passed. He remembered his dad's words, "Son, the world can change in a blink. Be ready for it." Guess the old man had been right. Outside, the air was thick with panic and sirens. Jake ran toward his truck, heart pounding, and that's when he saw the first one up close, a guy in a torn delivery uniform, skin pale like candle wax, eyes glassy and blank. The thing turned its head slow, sniffed the air, and let out this deep, rattling hiss. Jake didn't wait. He jumped in his truck, slammed the door, turned the key, and peeled out of there, tires squealing. He drove toward the outskirts, trying to get clear of the madness downtown. The radio was still buzzing, bits of emergency chatter, voices breaking in and out, words like containment breach, stay indoors, infection. It all sounded like some nightmare movie, except it wasn't. The world had gone off script. About an hour later, Jake stopped by a gas station on Highway 36. The place looked deserted, lights flickering, a vending machine laying on its side. He crept in, moving careful, keeping his knife close. That's where he met Mason. Mason was a former Marine, tall, buzz-cut, with the kind of look that said he'd seen some real bad stuff before. He was in the back of the store, loading up on supplies, cans, ammo, bottled water. When Jake came around the corner, Mason swung his rifle up, eyes sharp. "Easy, man," Jake said, "hands up." "Ain't one of them." Mason stared a second, then lowered the barrel. "You sure about that?" Jake gave a crooked grin. "Pretty sure I ain't dead yet." Mason snorted. "Then you're lucky. Most folks are." That's how their team started, two strangers who didn't trust each other but didn't have a choice. As dawn crept over the mountains, they heard more of them outside, those low, dragging footsteps and soft moans that made the hair on your neck stand up. Jake peeked out the window and saw 5, maybe 6 of them, wandering near the pumps. "We can't stay," Mason said. "There's an old ranger station up near Bear Creek. We get there, maybe find others." Jake nodded. "Let's roll." They slipped out the back, moving quiet, sticking to the shadows. The road ahead was cracked and empty, but every sound felt louder than it should have, the rustle of wind through trees, the distant creak of a swing, the soft echo of footsteps that didn't belong to them. They reached Jake's truck and started it up, but before they could pull away, a voice called out, "Wait." Don't leave me. A young woman ran out from behind a billboard, blonde hair wild, clutching a backpack. She looked terrified. Jake hesitated. Mason muttered, "Could be bit." But the woman raised her arms, showing she was clean. "Please," she gasped, "I'm not one of them. My name's Riley." Jake looked at Mason. "We can't just leave her." Mason rolled his eyes. "Fine. But if she turns, she's yours." Riley climbed in the back seat, breathing heavy, whispering thank yous. As they drove off, the world behind them burned brighter, the city skyline a shadow against orange flames. Hours later, the trio reached Bear Creek. The ranger station stood half-collapsed but still holding strong. They cleared it out, boarded windows, and made it their base. For the first time in days, they had a moment to breathe. Mason cleaned his rifle, Jake checked the generator, and Riley sat by the window, watching smoke rise in the distance. "You think it's everywhere?" she asked quietly. Mason nodded. "It's everywhere." Jake sighed. "Then we make our own world here." For a week, they survived off canned beans and bottled water, taking turns on watch. The nights were the worst. You'd hear them in the trees, slow shuffling, low moans, the crack of a twig. They never stopped moving. Never slept. Riley started writing in a little notebook she'd found. She said it helped her not lose her mind. "Maybe someday someone will read this," she said. "And they'll know we tried." One night, while Jake was on guard, he saw headlights in the distance. A truck, moving fast. He woke Mason, who grabbed his rifle. The truck pulled up rough, doors swinging open, and 3 more survivors spilled out, a father and his 2 sons, all wide-eyed and dirty. "We saw your smoke," the father said, "thought you might be safe." His name was Cooper, a schoolteacher before everything went bad. His boys, Tyler and Ben, were maybe 17, 18. They joined the group, and for a minute, it almost felt like community again. They shared stories around the dim lantern, about the first days, about people disappearing, about the government falling silent. But the hope didn't last long. 2 nights later, Cooper vanished. Gone without a sound. Mason and Jake searched the woods with flashlights, calling his name, but all they found was his shoe caught on a root and a trail of blood that stopped halfway through the creek. When they got back, Riley was pale. "I heard something," she whispered. "Voices. Out there." Jake frowned. "More people?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "They were whispering my name." That night, nobody slept. The wind howled through the cracks, and the undead gathered close, drawn by the scent of the living. Mason stood by the door, rifle ready. "They're getting smarter," he muttered. Jake shook his head. "They can't think." "Then how come they found us?" Mason shot back. Before Jake could answer, the power flickered, then died. The room dropped into darkness. Riley screamed as a hand slammed against the window, gray skin, broken nails, eyes glowing in the flashlight beam. The walls shook under the weight of the horde. "We gotta move," Mason shouted. Jake grabbed Riley's hand, pulled her toward the back door, while Mason covered them, firing short bursts. The night erupted in chaos, roars, breaking glass, gunfire. They ran through the woods, branches sloshing at their faces, lungs burning. Behind them, the ranger station went up in flames, their last bit of safety gone. By dawn, they'd lost Tyler somewhere along the trail. Ben kept calling for his brother until Mason forced him to stop. "Noise'll bring more of 'em," he growled. The kid's face was streaked with tears and dirt. They made camp in an old barn near a dried-up cornfield. No one talked for hours. Finally, Jake said, "We keep moving. Head west. Maybe there's still something left out there." Mason nodded slow. "Maybe." Riley just stared at the horizon. "You hear that?" she whispered. Jake listened. At first, it was just the wind. Then he heard it, distant, faint, like a radio signal cutting through static. A voice. "If anyone's out there." "Safe zone established, coordinates." The words faded, then returned. Mason grabbed the radio. "Say again." "Where are you?" The voice crackled back. "Cheyenne Mountain, repeat, survivors welcome." The group froze. Cheyenne Mountain was maybe 60 miles away. If that signal was real, it meant there were others. A chance. A way out. Jake looked at Mason. "Guess we got our next move." Mason nodded. "Then we better move fast. 'Cause those things, they don't stop." And as the sun climbed over the wrecked fields, the world felt quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before something bad. And somewhere behind them, deep in the woods, the echo of a familiar voice whispered through the trees, soft, broken, almost human, calling Jake's name. The morning after that radio call, the air felt heavier, like the world itself was holding its breath. Jake, Mason, Riley, and Ben packed what little they had, some canned food, 2 rifles, and half a tank of gas left in Jake's old Ford. 60 miles didn't sound like much before the world went crazy, but now it felt like crossing an ocean full of monsters. The map spread across the hood showed the route, down I-25, past the burned-out towns, through open country, straight toward the mountain. Jake traced the line with his finger. "We stick to the back roads," he said. "Highways'll be packed with wrecks and walkers." Mason nodded, loading a fresh mag into his rifle. "Keep your eyes peeled. We don't know who's still out here, or what's waiting at." They rolled out slow, the truck's engine humming low, tires crunching over gravel. The morning light made the world look calm again for a moment, like it was pretending everything was fine, but the burned barns and broken signs told the truth. Civilization wasn't coming back. Not like it was. Riley sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her notebook open on her lap. "You think that signal's real?" she asked. Jake shrugged, eyes on the road. "Only one way to find out." Ben was in the back, silent, fidgeting with a photo of his brother. Mason sat beside him, saying nothing, but the way he checked the mirrors every few minutes said he was feeling it too, the paranoia, the weight of being hunted. Around noon, they reached a small town called Mill Creek. Population sign half burned, stores gutted, streets empty except for a few cars rusting in the sun. Jake slowed down. "We can refuel here," he said. "Grab whatever we can find." Mason gave a nod. "Quick in and out. No noise." They pulled up to an old diner with a gas pump out front. The windows were busted, the door hinging by one hinge. Inside, dust floated in the light beams cutting through the cracks. The smell of old grease and something sour hung thick. Riley found a few sealed bottles of soda, and Ben filled up 2 jugs with water from the kitchen tap that still ran weakly. Mason siphoned gas while Jake checked the perimeter. Everything was too quiet. That's when he saw movement across the street, a shadow darting behind a truck. He froze, raised his knife, heart pounding. "We got company," he hissed. Mason came up beside him, rifle ready. Then a voice called out, shaky but human. "Don't shoot. Please." From behind the truck stepped a woman in her late 20s, clothes torn, holding a baseball bat wrapped in duct tape. Behind her, 2 kids peeked out, a boy and a girl, couldn't be older than 10. "We ain't bit," she said fast. Jake lowered his knife a little. "Who are you?" "Name's Brooklyn," she replied. "These are my brother's kids. We've been hiding since the outbreak. You guys got room?" Jake glanced at Mason. Mason's jaw tightened. "We barely got room for ourselves." Riley stepped forward. "We can't just leave him." Mason sighed. cuss it under his breath, then nodded. Fine. But we keep moving. No stops. Brooklyn gave a shaky smile. You won't regret it. Jake wasn't so sure. They packed everyone in, tight squeeze, kids sitting between Mason and Ben, and hit the road again. The truck felt heavier, not just from the weight but from the new responsibility. Jake looked in the mirror, saw the two kids clinging to each other, eyes wide and scared. He felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt since the world ended, hope, or maybe duty. They made good time till dusk, when the sky turned a deep orange and the wind started to howl. They were near the foothills now, where the land rose up and the forest grew thick. The radio signal came through again, clearer this time. Cheyenne Mountain Safe Zone, coordinates 38.744, minus 104.846, survivors, you are not alone. Riley's eyes lit up. That's it. We're close. But Mason didn't smile. Could be a trap, he muttered. Could be someone using that signal to lure people in. Jake nodded slowly. Yeah, but if there's even a chance it's real, we gotta take it. The group agreed, though the unease hung heavy. That night, they camped near an old farmhouse. The stars were bright, the kind you only see far from cities. Jake took first watch. He sat by the fire, listening to the wind whistle through broken windows, trying not to think about the faces of the people they'd lost. Around midnight, he heard soft footsteps behind him. It was Brooklyn. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Keep hearing things out there. Jake smiled weakly. Out here, it's either the dead, or your own thoughts creeping on you. She sat down beside him. You think there's really a safe place left? He looked at the fire. Gotta believe there is. Otherwise, what's the point? Suddenly, Ben screamed from inside the barn. Jake and Mason ran in, guns raised. Ben was standing by the hayloft, shaken. I saw him, he stammered. Tyler, he was right there, staring at me. Mason's face went cold. Ben, your brother's gone. No, Ben said, voice cracking, I swear it was him. Jake scanned the shadows with his flashlight. Nothing. Just the creak of wood and the whisper of wind. Get some rest, kid, Mason said softly. But Jake couldn't shake it. Later, while everyone slept, he heard something moving outside, the sound of footsteps, slow and dragging. He stepped out, knife ready, and saw a figure standing at the edge of the light. It was tall, lean, wearing what looked like a torn hoodie. The head tilted, and the dim light hit the face. Jake's stomach dropped, it looked like Tyler. Pale, hollow-eyed, but still. Tyler. Tyler, he whispered. The figure twitched, then made a low gurgling sound before lurching forward. Jake froze, torn between instinct and disbelief. Then Mason burst out of the barn, fired once, and the thing dropped. Jake turned, furious. That was him. Mason lowered his rifle. That wasn't your buddy anymore. You know that. Jake clenched his fists, but he didn't argue. Deep down, Mason was right. Still, the sound of that shot carried through the valley, and within minutes, they heard the distant moans of the horde responding. Move! Now! Mason barked. Everyone scrambled into the truck, the kids crying, Riley clutching her bag. They tore down the dirt road as figures spilled out from the trees behind them, hundreds of them, their eyes catching the headlights like wild animals. The road twisted through the hills, narrow and broken. One wrong move and they'd be done. Jake gripped the wheel tight, swerving around wreckage, adrenaline pumping. We're not gonna make it. Riley shouted. We'll make it. Jake yelled back. The truck roared up a steep incline, wheels slipping, and at the top, they found an old tunnel entrance blocked by a fallen sign. That leads to the military route, Mason said. Shortcut to the mountain. Jake slammed the gas, crashing through debris. Inside, the tunnel was pitch black except for the weak glow of the headlights. The sound of the undead faded behind them, replaced by the echo of their own engine. They drove in silence for what felt like forever. Then the radio crackled again. "If anyone hears this, turn back, repeat, turn back." The voice was broken, panicked. Mason turned it off. "Could be interference," he muttered, though his voice didn't sound convinced. Halfway through the tunnel, the truck's lights flickered, then died. "Ah, come on," Jake groaned, hitting the dash. The engine sputtered, coughed, and quit. Complete darkness swallowed them. The kids started crying softly. Mason clicked on a flashlight, the beam cutting through dust and graffiti on the walls, things like "Help US" and "They're inside." Riley whispered, "We need to move. We can push it." They got out, boots echoing on the concrete, air thick and damp. Jake and Mason started pushing the truck while Riley guided from the front. Every sound felt too loud. Then came a soft tapping, like fingernails on metal. Ben turned his head, flashlight trembling. "What was that?" Brooklyn shushed him, but the sound came again, louder this time. Then another. From the ceiling. Jake looked up and saw movement, shapes crawling across the pipes, fast, unnatural. "Go! Go!" Mason yelled. They ran, leaving the truck, sprinting toward the faint light at the end of the tunnel. Figures dropped from above, gray, twisted, hissing. Jake swung his knife, Mason fired, Riley grabbed the kids, dragging them through the dust and echoing screams. When they burst out the other side, the morning light nearly blinded them. They stumbled onto a ridge overlooking a massive valley, and in the distance, like a fortress carved into stone, stood Cheyenne Mountain. They collapsed on the ground, gasping, covering their ears from the howls coming from the tunnel behind them. Mason blocked the entrance with rocks and debris till the sound faded. The group sat in silence, shaken. Brooklyn hugged the kids tight, whispering that it was over, though everyone knew it wasn't. "We're close," Jake said between breaths. "We made it this far." Mason scanned the mountain through his scope. "There's movement up there. Could be guards, or something worse." Riley touched his arm. "Then let's find out." They started the climb, slow and careful, the wind cold against their faces. Every step felt like walking deeper into fate. And as they neared the mountain gates, a voice echoed from above, mechanical, stern. "Identify yourselves or be fired upon." Jake froze, heart racing. For the first time in weeks, someone alive was speaking to them from behind a wall. "We're survivors," he shouted. "From Denver." There was a long pause, then the voice replied, "Hold your position." The gates groaned open just enough for two soldiers in biohazard suits to step out, rifles aimed. "Check him," one said. A scanner passed over each of them, beeping green. When it hit Mason, it flickered yellow. The soldier frowned. "You've been exposed." Mason's jaw clenched. "I ain't bit." "Still," the soldier said. "Protocol's protocol." Jake stepped forward. "He's clean. He saved all of us." The soldier hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. You all go in, but he's quarantined." Mason looked at Jake, half smiling. "Told you the world don't cut breaks." Then he followed the guards inside while the rest were led toward the inner gate. For the first time since the fall, they felt safe, metal walls, armed guards, lights humming overhead. But deep down, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that safety here came with a price. As they walked deeper into the mountain, Riley leaned close. "You notice something off about this place?" Jake glanced around, soldiers whispering, scientists moving fast, a faint alarm echoing from down the hall. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It feels like they're hiding something not." Brooklyn held the kids close, eyes darting nervously. Ben trailed behind, staring at the closed quarantine door where Mason disappeared. Somewhere beyond that steel wall, Mason sat alone, listening to the hum of machines, and the faint, unmistakable sound of a heartbeat that wasn't his. The halls of Cheyenne Mountain were colder than they expected, metal walls echoing every footstep, the hum of generators making the air feel alive in a weird, mechanical way. Jake, Riley, Brooklyn, Ben, and the kids were led down a long corridor by two soldiers whose eyes never left them, rifles tight against their chests. The group's nerves were raw. The kids clung to Brooklyn like their lives depended on it, which, after all, they did. Machines beeped, screens flickered, and the distant thump of what sounded like heavy doors sliding open kept everyone on edge. When they reached a checkpoint, a woman in a crisp lab coat stepped out, tablet in hand, her expression neutral but cold. "Welcome to the safe zone," she said. "We've been expecting you. Protocol dictates a debriefing before assignment to quarters." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Safe zone, huh? Looks more like a fortress." She smiled faintly, as if that word, fortress, meant something different to her. "You're alive. That's all that matters." Riley frowned. "And Mason?" The lab woman's expression flickered for a moment, then she nodded to a side door. "Quarantine. He'll be checked for infection." Jake's gut tightened. He could feel Mason's absence like a weight, but there was nothing he could do but move forward. The group was escorted to a large common area where survivors were already milling around, families, loners, a few soldiers who looked as haunted as anyone else. Everyone had stories etched into their faces, scratches, bruises, haunted eyes. Riley whispered to Jake, "Feels like everyone's carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders." He nodded, the words hitting him harder than he wanted. Brooklyn knelt, soothing the kids, and even Ben's smile was forced. As they settled into the common area, alarms went off, a deep, resonating wail that made the walls vibrate. People froze, and a soldier barked orders. "All non-essential personnel, stay put. Quarantine breach on level B3. Jake's stomach dropped. "What now?" Riley's voice was tight. "Sounds like the stuff they're hiding is leaking out." Meanwhile, down in level B3, Mason sat in a stark room, hooked to monitors, sensors crawling over his body. The scientists argued in hushed tones behind glass. One pointed at the screens, another muttered something about contamination and mutations. Mason's mind raced. Every scenario he could imagine involved him leaving here broken, or worse. Then the alarms hit, the same ones echoing through the upper levels. Through the glass, he could see a shadow moving where there shouldn't be one, pale skin, twisted limbs, jerking movements. The test subjects weren't gone, they'd broken containment. Mason gritted his teeth, preparing to act. Back upstairs, Jake and Riley were moving toward the stairwell when the walls shook violently. The quake set off another alarm. Soldiers shouted, running to defend gates and check levels. "What the hell is happening?" Jake yelled over the cacophony. A nearby soldier turned, rifle raised. "Containment breach. Zombies are inside the facility." Panic erupted. People screamed, shoving toward exits. Jake grabbed Riley and Ben, shoving them down the hallway while Brooklyn struggled to keep the kids moving. "Stick close. Don't stop," he shouted. From behind, the metallic clang of doors being torn off their hinges filled the air. The creatures weren't just wandering, they were hunting. They reached the stairwell only to find a swarm of the undead blocking their path, limbs twisted, eyes glassy, moaning low and hungry. Jake grabbed a fire extinguisher from a nearby station, swinging it at the nearest zombie, knocking it back enough to carve a path. Mason, realizing the breach was spreading, had already broken out of the lab, using a security panel to override doors. He found a group of soldiers trapped on the lower level and helped them fend off the advancing horde. "We don't have much time," he yelled. "We need the armory, they've got the big guns down there." Jake and the others fought their way down the stairwell, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning wires. Every floor had more of the infected, each encounter closer than the last. Riley swung a metal pipe, fending off a lunge from one of the creatures while Ben screamed behind her. Brooklyn shielded the kids, but even she was scratched on the arm, blood streaking her sleeve. "Keep moving!" Jake shouted, desperation threading his voice. By the time they reached the bottom level, Mason met them, rifle loaded, eyes wild. "About time," he said. "We're running out of room." He pointed toward the armory, where supplies and automatic weapons were stacked like a fortress of steel. Inside the armory, they grabbed everything they could carry: ammo, rifles, grenades, even Molotovs improvised from the chemical lab supplies. Mason handed Jake a shotgun, slinging one over his shoulder. "We either make it through this or we don't. There ain't no in-between." Jake nodded, heart hammering. "Let's do it." The group moved out, barricading doors behind them as they advanced toward the mountain's main exit. Along the way, they saw the toll the horde had taken: soldiers torn apart, survivors trapped and crying, hallways littered with bodies. But something else caught Jake's eye: a small child, maybe 6 years old, hiding behind debris, shaking. "Hey, it's okay," Jake said softly, crouching down. The child's eyes were wide, terrified, but the gesture broke through the fear. He grabbed the child's hand, and the group pressed on, now carrying 3 more survivors, adding to their fragile human chain. The final stretch to the main exit was a narrow hallway, flanked by reinforced gates. Ahead, shadows moved, more of the infected, faster, smarter somehow. Mason took the lead, Jake close behind, blasting with the shotgun. Bodies fell, the echo of gunfire bouncing off the concrete walls like thunder. Riley and Brooklyn helped push the children along, tossing Molotovs when zombies tried to flank them. The chaos was deafening, a mix of screams, snarls, gunshots, and the groan of metal doors twisting under pressure. At one point, Jake was slammed into the wall, the shotgun skittering across the floor. A creature lunged, he grabbed a fire extinguisher, swung with all his might, and felt the satisfying thud as it collapsed. He didn't have time to catch his breath. They were almost there. Finally, they burst through the main gates, stepping into the crisp mountain air. Sunlight hit their faces, momentarily blinding them, but the moment of relief was short. The valley beyond was crawling with thousands of the undead, spreading like a living flood. Cheyenne Mountain wasn't just a safe zone, it was an island in a sea of horror. Jake looked at the group, eyes heavy but determined. "We make it inside, we fight. We survive. Together." Mason, bleeding from a scratch but smiling grimly, nodded. "Ain't nothing else we can do." They ran toward the inner perimeter, soldiers opening fire from towers, creating a wall of steel and lead. Every shot counted, every step forward was paid for with sweat, blood, and courage. Inside the innermost compound, the gates slammed shut behind them. Guards patrolled, medical teams rushed to help the wounded, and the kids were ushered to safety. Jake, Mason, Riley, Brooklyn, and Ben collapsed against a wall, breathing heavily, covered in grime and blood. For a moment, the world was quiet, the undead held back by walls, bullets, and sheer willpower. But in the back of their minds, each of them knew this was temporary. The horde would come again. The safe zone had walls, but it didn't have forever. Mason, bandaged but alert, looked at Jake. "We did it, man. For now." Jake gave a short laugh, exhaustion and relief mixing. "For now," he echoed. As night fell, the survivors gathered on a rooftop overlooking the valley. The moon reflected off the steel towers, and in the distance, the low, echoing moans of the undead reminded them of the world they'd lost. Riley wrote in her notebook, hands trembling, documenting their survival, their losses, and their victories. Brooklyn held the kids, telling stories of better days, as if her voice could fight back the darkness. Ben stayed close to Mason, silent, learning that survival came at a cost. Jake stared out at the horizon, the wind whipping through his hair. He thought of the people they'd lost, the friends who wouldn't make it, and those who had made it this far. Somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope remained. A reminder that even in a world consumed by death, the human spirit fought like hell. Cheyenne Mountain wasn't paradise, it was a temporary fortress, a glimpse of life clinging to the edges of chaos. But it was enough. And for Jake, Mason, Riley, Brooklyn, Ben, and the kids, it was a place to fight, a place to plan, a place to survive. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, they were alive. And that, for now, was everything. The echoes of civilization were faint, but in those walls, in the courage of the survivors, humanity still whispered back, promising that as long as people like them were willing to fight, the world might one day hear it again.